partition. So he was more closely aligned with the Roman people, though, which is sometimes a little bit different than partition, what they generally are. But this kind of contrasted with the current Senate at the time. Yes, there was a Senate then. This is ancient Rome. The Senate has been around for a really long time. But this kind of contrasted with the Senate because they were not very aligned with the Roman people. It's slipping my mind right now what the Roman people are actually considered. They're not patricians. It's a different word, but it's slipping my mind. I apologize. So he was very like with the people, in the people. But the weird thing is not a lot of people actually liked him until he died. I guess they didn't realize what he did. But once we get further into it, we see why they may have not have liked him. So Caesar was in fact a dictator. He had a dictatorship, and I think this is probably why a lot of people didn't like him, because he was a military officer, so that's just how he ran. That's how he ran his life. He was given orders and he would do them. And that is kind of the way he ran his office, is he gave orders and people had to do them. So he saw this as a grant that he could just do whatever he wanted whenever he wanted it, and the Roman people did not really like this because a lot of the things weren't really good. He had this all-encompassing power, which it was actually supposed to be temporary. He wasn't supposed to be a dictator for long, but essentially he kind of kept himself there, and that was really what made him a dictator in the end. Is he kept himself in that dictatorship and in the office for too long. The Roman people did not want that. They had a democracy at the time, and he ruined democracy, honestly. So these three people, Octavian, Antony, and Lepidus, I don't know if I'm saying his last name right, they essentially take control of the Roman state. So they defeat Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar dies, and great. Julius Caesar, another thing about him was he's like just not very nice, honestly. Like, we don't really like him, honestly. I don't personally like him. I think some people might. That's why it's said that he was a little more popular after his death, but I wouldn't say I like it. So these three people, Octavian, Antony, and Lepidus, take over Rome. They divide Rome into three different parts. So I don't quite remember what those parts are called, and I don't have a note essentially of that. But so in 43 they divide these up, but then 36, Lepidus, the one I can't pronounce, he dies. So the other two, Antony and Octavian, they split it into two. So Rome is now East and West Rome. So in this, there is a little bit of a strife eventually, because there's different splits. There's a cultural and linguistic split between the two, and the cultural split comes from the fact that the eastern side of Rome is more Greek than the western side, which is more Roman, obviously, and the Greeks and Rome's are not getting along at this point. I don't really think they ever did, so yeah, that's why. On the west, as I stated, is a Latin side. It had never been conquered by anyone except Rome. So this was a new world, and there was only the Roman language and culture there. No one had ever imposed anything else. But then we head over to the east side, which is the Greek area. This had already been conquered by the Greeks, so there was mainly Greek language and government, which they had a little bit of a better democracy system, in my personal opinion. That could differ, obviously, but they had a better system, in my opinion. So it split, and there was Romans and Greeks, and if you're Canadian, which I'm Canadian, we have a kind of French and English divide, and you could see it as kind of the same thing, I guess you could say. So these two sides are a little bit in strife, and they eventually have a battle. This is named the Battle of Octavian. Octavian comes out with a name that is what we know as he's Augustus. So he essentially introduces a bunch of changes under this new name and under this new rule, and we'll talk about those in a second. Antony and Cleopatra fall in love. They have this idea that they want to conquer the rest of Rome and take over both parts. But the issue is they don't really have a great plan. So they go into this. It's a ship attack. They go into this harbor and they basically get trapped by Augustus and Agrippa, which Agrippa is Augustus's friend. So they get trapped, and then Antony makes what some say to be a fatal decision of splitting his army into three. So two stay and one leave, and now one leaves with Cleopatra. So he sacrifices his army for Cleopatra. So cute, so loving, but it wasn't very good for Antony, honestly. So Antony and Cleopatra grew back up in Egypt, I believe. Yes, they grew back up in Egypt. But the weird thing is they don't grow their troops over time. So they're the same amount of people they left with. Those two troops that they left behind, they're done for. The one troop that they went with, that's all they have to their name at this point. So when Augustus comes in to Alexandria, he really defeats them quite well. And then it's basically a Romeo and Juliet story, which I'm not quite sure, but I would theorize that Romeo and Juliet came from this idea of Antony and Cleopatra because they were before Romeo and Juliet, obviously. But basically, Antony hears that Cleopatra is dead, and then he dies, and then Cleopatra hears that Antony is dead, and then she dies. So, miscommunication, honestly. So, the end of this is all in 31, and then Augustus takes their children back to Rome, and the Roman Empire is whole again. Augustus, he has slayed, honestly. So, all of this means that Egypt is back under Roman rule again, and that the provinces are taken back from the west. So, Rome is won. So, Augustus brings back a lot of money. Lots of money. He is rich now. So, he brings that back, and he invested into the city. He makes the city more beautiful. He puts statues. He funds a lot of things, not just physical, like also programs and stuff. So people really like him. And then we're going to move on to his settlements now, which is where the Julian laws on marriage come in. So the first settlement, I'm not too familiar with, so I'm probably going to be looking at my notes a lot for this. But the first settlement was an attempt to set up a monarchy. So this creates the Senate as a functional area. And Augustus is not the monarch, which some are questionable about, because why would he set up a monarchy but then not become a monarch? Interesting decision, Augustus. So he restores the Republic, and he makes a bunch of offices and makes a lot of people happy basically. And his name is favored by the gods now. People really like Augustus, so his name is favored by the gods. Then we move on to the second settlement in 22. In 22, he gets sick all of a sudden, but he does not. You remember back from when Antony and Cleopatra's kids were adopted by Augustus. it has everything. It's a pretty comprehensive history of the world because the world's pretty long. But I'll run through the little chapters they have right now quickly. So the first one, I did read this too, is about foundations. So the Big Bang, they do a little bit on that, and then Homo sapiens, and then civilization. Then we move into early civilized life, aka ancient Mesopotamia. This is one of my large interests, this area. I've never actually studied it at the university I go to. I have never found a class about it, so I wish to get into more of it. Then we move into ancient Egypt, and then we go ancient China, and then we come down to the classical age, which is about the Greeks, Hellenistic world, Rome, Christianity, India, China. And then we move into the Eurasian crossroads, Islam and Arab empires, Middle East and making of Europe, India, Imperial China, Japan, Europe, and then we eventually get into the Canada. I believe they only talk about Canada quite quickly, honestly. Here, it's not a very, it's an American book, we can always tell. And they go into acceleration, so political change. I have not read this far in the book. And looks like we actually go through the world wars as well. That would be an interesting part. I really like World War history as well. It's not something I've gone a lot into. Ancient Rome and ancient Greece are easier for me, but I should go into that one a little bit more. But yeah, it has maps. Let's see if I can find one. I'm gonna try and find one. Here's one. It looks like China. It looks like it's a map of China. I have also not read that far. Honestly, ancient China, it also really interests me, but that is a loophole for another day because that is a huge history. I'm just starting to understand ancient Rome and ancient Greece, so that is what I'm tapping on. I got off track, but I just wanted to let you guys know. So now let's move back to the Julian laws on marriage and adultery. These were introduced in the year 19, and they were named after Augustus because, let's look back, his real name is technically Julius. Yes, we said Octavian before, but he also has the name Julius. It's really confusing. Everyone had multiple names then. So, essentially, the Julian laws of marriage and adultery. Oh no, I'm sorry. Augustus was realizing that Rome's population was really declining, so he needed to make a change. So he made marriage and reproduction a state matter. This meant that the state could look into your bedroom, essentially, and dictate what you did with your free time. So it also penalized a lack of marriage, which was really disliked by a lot of people because it penalized a lack of marriage for the general person, but also a widower. Widowers only had, I think it was 3 months. Yeah, I think I remember being 3 months that you had to find a new husband or wife if you were a widow. And a lot of people were like, guys, that is not long enough. This is unacceptable. So there was a lot of outrage over that, but Augustus kept them. So this was also an attempt to really push the Roman culture over Greek culture, because as I stated, Greek culture is still up in the air right now, but he really wanted to push the Roman culture on everyone. So there was also, on these Julian laws of marriage and adultery, it kind of added to the fact that women were really treated as objects, because basically women had no rights back then. And these no rights meant that men could dictate population of Rome, I don't know the numbers. I don't know if it actually numerically did help in Rome, but I assume it does, because who wouldn't want a tax break? You just gotta have 3 kids, right? But the other one that I've been saying this whole time, Julian laws on adultery and marriage. Adultery comes in a lot worse. Adultery was a crime, so you could get, unfortunately, killed for that, or you could get banished from Rome. And we actually have an example of this. So Augustus's daughter, her name is slipping me right now, but she committed adultery, and Augustus said, yeah, I made these laws. I'm going to uphold them and be fair to everyone. My daughter is now exiled. So this is kind of rough. He's not a big family man, I can see. And if I remember correctly, I don't have this here, but I believe that daughter's mom also went into exile with her because she didn't want her to be alone. So Augustus lost 2 family members because of that. But a lot of people say, my history teacher that taught me all this information, she says that although Augustus was really mean, he was fair, and he upheld those laws for everyone and made sure that they were consistent for absolutely everyone. So essentially, these are they are changed in the year 9 CE, and then Augustus actually dies in 14 CE. So after Augustus dies, these are still in act. I actually don't know how long they're in act till. I should probably research that. But the Julian laws on marriage and adultery are in act for quite a long time. And yeah, I mean, what can we do? They're an important part of history that we definitely need to look back on, though, because we need to understand how women's rights were oppressed in the Roman days and how women were viewed in the Roman century. In one of my papers that I'm writing right now is we're comparing how women were viewed in Rome through the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, and 4th century. By the 4th century, we actually have some developments that prestige can be passed on from senators to their daughters or female members of the family. So this is important when we're looking back on women's history and trying to understand where everything came from. So yeah, I just thought this would be an interesting informational video for ASMR. It's probably silly, but I didn't really do much ASMR. I kind of just whispered a story the whole time, and I apologize for looking at my nose so much. I didn't have time to memorize quite a lot, but this is one of my favorite eras of history. Specifically, actually, I really enjoy the beginning of ancient Rome and the Roman Republic. So the story of Romulus and